Hey everyone, welcome back. Today is December 2nd of 2023. On this rather unique YouTube channel, I talk about how amazing coincidences are not only an everyday occurrence here in our world, but how such events are also connected through numerology, as evidenced by use of the most basic Kabbalistic studies, astrology, horology or the measurement of time, and Gematria or Gematria, which explores the numerical underbelly of language, especially the English alphabet. Yesterday, December 1st, we received two major news stories about the federal government that once again share a deep, mystical connection with one another. First, we learned about the death of Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, the first ever female justice to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. She died at the age of 93, and in the second part of this video, we'll talk about how this all connects to the planet Saturn, the planet of justice, which has ordinal gematria of 93. Earlier this year, I made two videos focusing on Saturn and the U.S. House of Representatives, both about Kevin McCarthy getting booted from his role as the Speaker of the House. Well, on the same day that O'Connor died, December 1st, news broke that for just the third time since the American Civil War, a member of the United States House of Representatives was expelled on the basis of criminal activity while in office. That man's name is George Santos, and similar to how O'Connor was the first female justice, Santos is the first openly gay Republican to be elected to federal office. The names Sandra and Santos both begin with S-A-N or San, which is saint in Spanish, which I will elaborate a little later in this video. Santos was a U.S. representative for the 3rd District of New York State. And what blew me away about a woman named O'Connor dying on the same day that a politician from New York got the boot is that back on July 26th, which is New York State's anniversary, famous singer Sinead O'Connor died on the same day that a crane caught fire and collapsed in New York City. That was also the same day that Hunter Biden's plea deal collapsed. Now, July 26th in New York was something I told my viewers to look out for back in my video on the Long Island serial killer from a couple weeks before that. All of these videos that you see on the screen are linked down below in the description if you want to see more about that. So here we have this connection with a collapse and now Santos getting expelled. And this brings us to the code of Gematria, where every letter is assigned a number, 1 through 26, relative to its position in the alphabet. This basic method can also be reversed to give us a complementary reverse cipher. Using these methods, the words collapse and expelled both share values of 83 ordinal and 133 reverse. The name George Santos also sort of reminds us of George Soros, which I only really point out because Soros was born in 1930, which happens to be the same year that Sandra Day O'Connor was born. Now, George Soros was 57 years old when George Santos was born. And notice how the name George gives us a 57 in the ordinal method. In reverse, the name Sandra Day O'Connor sums to 251. And notice how the former U.S. Justice died a span of 251 days after her last birthday. 251, a number we commonly see coded into stories of death. But what I really want to focus on in this video is how the expulsion of George Santos from Congress is a massive riddle connected to the number 666. Which, of course, was the number of focus in my last video on the death of Henry Kissinger. Now, 666 in biblical numerology is widely known as the number of the beast, as revealed in the book of Revelation. This probably has something to do with why George Santos mentioned hell in his quote. "To hell with this place," he said about Congress. In our reduction methods of Gematria, where every double-digit number is reduced to a single digit using the rules of numerology prior to adding it to the equation, this phrase, "to hell with this place," sums to 90 and 99, which intriguingly yields an upside-down 666. Now, the digits 6 and 9 are very closely related, as they are similar upside down and have many interesting similar properties when multiplying by 6 or 9. But consider how this all happened on December 1st, the date written 12/1, and the number of the beast comes from the book of Revelation, which sums to 121 ordinal. To truly understand this riddle, we need to look at the first of 3 men to be expelled from the House since the Civil War. Michael Myers, also known as Ozzie Myers, a Pennsylvania congressman who was given the boot by his fellow legislators in 1980 after he was caught up in a bribery scandal known as abscam. Myers' numerology and how it connects to yesterday is what really brings this all together and helps us understand why everything came together as it did. So this riddle connected to the Supreme Court is all about the number of the beast. And in ordinal, Supreme Court sums to 174, just like number of the beast. In English Standard Gematria, which is one of the 2 main extended methods I teach, this is a denary cipher with a similar structure to the ancient Greek and Hebrew charts. Number of the beast sums to 1074, which is George Santos in reverse Sumerian. We'll look more at that in a little bit. But let's talk about this guy, Michael Myers. When you take his full name, Michael Joseph Ozzie Myers, you get an ordinal value of 285, which happens to match House of Representatives, where he was kicked out of. Using capital letters, the name Sandra Day O'Connor also sums to 285. Capitals added maintains the alphabetic order, but adds 26 for every capital letter that's used. Now, this 285 stands out because our buddy George Santos here was born 2,850 days after Michael Joseph Ozzie Myers was kicked out of Congress back in 1980. October 2nd was the date of that event. When George Santos became a congressman himself, the Supreme Court was 2,805 months old. And now his expulsion on the same day as the death of a major justice. Notice how the number of the beast equals 285 with capital letters. And in reverse, number of the beast is 258, the same digits. Santos was born in the year 88. And in the alphabetic order, Santos gives us an 88. Well, in reverse, beast is an 88. He was expelled on the same day as the death of a judge. Judge also with an 88. When he got expelled yesterday, he received 311 votes in favor of expulsion. This brings us to Latin Gematria, which is a cipher that bridges the gap between Hebrew and Greek and the current standard English alphabetic order. This is also called Agrippa's key, what I consider to be the most significant cipher in this study. And 311 votes. Well, in Latin Gematria, the phrase "the beast" sums to 311. Now, only one other congressman was ever kicked out, expelled from the House of Representatives, and that was James Traficant. And notice how he was expelled on July 24th, or 7/24. When you write out number of the beast. It sums to 724. So let's talk about the number 666, which we all recognize. In Sumerian Gematria, which is the standard alphabetic order multiplied by 6, the first perfect number, the number most closely associated with time, the state of New York, which Santos was a representative of, sums to 666. Ozzie Myers, the first man expelled, notice how his name sums to 1669 and 966. And when Michael Myers was expelled in 1980, he was 13,666 days old. Of course, 13 is the sixth prime number. He was also booted 9,996 weeks after the founding of the Supreme Court. Sandra Day O'Connor, who died yesterday, was 606 months and 6 days old for that expulsion. When George Santos was born, Sandra Day O'Connor was 699 months old. When Santos took office in January, Michael Myers was 29,099 days old, which has the upside down 666. And when Santos was expelled, Myers was 966 months old, which is also 996 lunar phases. Of course, a lunar phase, measuring the time from new moon to new moon, we also call this a synodic month. And speaking of lunar phases, George Santos was born exactly 2,466 lunar phases after the Supreme Court was founded. SCOTUS, founded back on March 4th of 1789, as we see here. And think about this 24, right? Because you can add 2 plus 4 and get another 6. So this is kind of like another 666. Now, in ancient Hebrew, where many believe Gematria originated, the letter that's worth 6 is Vav, which is very similar to the glyph for the number 1. And notice how Michael Joseph Ozzie Myers has this Gematria of 111. And when he was expelled from Congress, it was on a date with primary numerology of 111. This achieved by adding all of the digits in the date as you would say them out loud, 10 plus 2 plus 19 plus 80. On top of that, October 7th is also, or 2nd, is also typically the 275th day of the year. And in the alphabetic order, when you write out 666, it sums to 275. The number of the beast is revealed in Revelation 13:18. When Sandra Day O'Connor left the Supreme Court back in 2006 for her retirement, the Supreme Court was exactly 11,318 weeks old, reflecting this 13:18, the big number of the beast verse. In ancient Hebrew, Revelation sums to 844. Michael Myers was born exactly 8,044 weeks after the Supreme Court was founded. Also, 603 as it's written in the book of Revelation, has matching 313 Gematria with O'Connor. Now, when O'Connor first assumed her role on the bench back in 1981, she was a span of exactly 618 months old. Now remember, 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. So perhaps another nod to this number right there. 666 is also the sum of two related numbers. 234 plus its inverse, 432. Notice how these sum to 666. Well, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, Ginsburg being the only other female justice to no longer sit on the bench. Of course, we have 4 women on the Supreme Court right now. But Ginsburg and O'Connor are the only two to have retired so far. And Ginsburg actually died while she was still serving on the court. Well, when Ginsburg died in 2020, notice how Sandra Day O'Connor was exactly 2,034 weeks old. And in the alphabetic order, Ginsburg's full name, Joan Ruth Bader Ginsburg, sums to 234. Of course, her name also has half of 666. You also get the 99. Of course, 9 plus 9 is the same as 6 plus 6 plus 6. But speaking of this 234, when Santos was expelled yesterday, it was 234 days before his next birthday. And check out how old the United States Supreme Court currently is. 234 years old. This is a deep script, ladies and gentlemen, and it really brings into question the reality, so to speak, of what we saw play out yesterday at the House, doesn't it? But there's a little bit of synchronicity with this, or additional synchronicity that I'll talk about, that makes me question even that. Now, in reverse, the Supreme Court sums to 198. And when Michael Myers was expelled, this happened in 1980, which represents the number 198 with the 0 ignored, as we usually do. In Latin Gematria, not only does beast equal 198, but the number of the beast equals 198 Latin ordinal. His state of Pennsylvania, also 198 with capital letters. You could also say it was the year 80 that he was expelled, and his last name, Myers, equals 80 in ordinal, which, by the way, is also the sum of the beast, 80 in ordinal. Mike Myers is currently 80 years old. Yesterday was 211 days after his birthday. That's the reverse gematria of 666, 211. And this is a pretty important number to the code as well, because it's the 47th prime number. And 47 is a big one. We have the death of a judge, 47, in connection with the beast coding. Beast equals 47. And wouldn't you know, it's Revelation 4:7 that first describes the four beasts of Revelation. Remember, 7 is the fourth prime number. George Santos was born 4 months and 7 days after Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg's birthday. But I also noticed how judge sums to 816 in Latin, whereas Supreme Court of the United States is 1816. The beast, 816 reverse. Yesterday was 8 months and 16 days after Ruth Bader Ginsburg's birthday. And there's more connections with Santos and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Ginsburg was born on March 15th of 1930 or 1933. So notice how she was born on the 74th day of the year. And in Gematria, Santos equals 74. Well, they were also born exactly 740 sidereal months apart. A sidereal month is the other measurement of the moon, measuring the orbit of the moon in relation to the stars rather than the lunar phase as we see it from Earth. So let's talk a little bit more about the riddle with Sandra Day O'Connor and the planet Saturn. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Sandra died the same day that Santos was expelled, and here we have this S-A-N connection. And in Spanish, San means saint, Well, the NFL's New Orleans Saints will be playing their 903rd game in franchise history, including the playoffs, this weekend. And this really stands out because 903 is the Latin Gematria of Supreme Court. And now we get the death of Sandra Day O'Connor at the age of 93. New Orleans will be playing the team from Detroit, Michigan. And notice how Detroit, Michigan equals 930 in Sumerian Gematria. If the Detroit Lions win, they'll be 9-3 on the season. And remember, the Lions are looking for their first NFC North Division title since 93. Actually, their first division title of any sort, since the NFC North didn't even exist back then. And not only did Sandra Day O'Connor die at the age of 93, but she also died 930 weeks after she retired from the Supreme Court. Not only does Supreme Court equal 903, but in standard Gematria, courtroom, also 903. Now, once again, this all connects to astrology. Of the 12 zodiac signs, the sign that is represented by the scales of justice is Libra, and the planet Saturn is exalted in the sign of Libra. Saturn, the planet of karma and justice. And, of course, in ordinal, Saturn gives us that 93. Saturn is an average of 888 million miles from the sun. This was a number found in Sandra Day O'Connor's age when she died, 4,888 weeks. And notice how the name Sandra Day O'Connor sums to 741 in Satanic Gematria. This, a cipher that's constructed around the number 666. Well, Saturn equals 741 in Standard Gematria. Santos equals 511 in Standard. That's the Latin value of Saturn. It's incredible how this all comes together, right? Especially once he mentions hell and Saturn, supposedly the black sun, the antithesis of light. By the way, yesterday's date, December 1st, we talked about this earlier, 121 with Revelation, like December 1st. Well, 121 is 11 squared. Yesterday also had numerology of 11. And yesterday had primary numerology of 56. Well, in the ancient Hebrew language, Saturn sums to both 11 in reduction and 56 in ordinal. And I also thought it was interesting that expulsion from the Senate or the House is enacted via Rule 11. See this? Rule 11, like Saturn, like the date numerology. But let's talk about this 56, because this is a really important number. Saturn 56. And earlier this year, the other big controversy in the House was the ouster of Kevin McCarthy. And once Kevin McCarthy left, we got Mike Johnson, who is now the 56th Speaker of the House, right? The New Orleans Saints enter this weekend with a record of 5-6, I should say. Yesterday had 56 numerology. Sandra Day O'Connor died 506 months after she first became a federal justice. 56 found in George Santos's full name. When you write the number 56 out, it sums to 118. And this is important because Santos was just expelled from the 118th United States Congress. And his birthday falls 118 days after Sandra Day O'Connor's. Expelled from Congress sums to 118. But this is still connected to 56 because the 56th prime number is 263. The 26th of March, or 26/3, is O'Connor's birthday. Now, that date can also be written as 326. Judge equals 326 in standard Gematria, and George Santos was born 3 months and 26 days after O'Connor's birthday. The Detroit Lions, by the way, have played a total of 1,326 games in franchise history. So earlier we mentioned this number 88, the birth year of Santos. Santos 88 like Judge. This is also 11 times 8, expelled from the 118th Congress. The New Orleans Saints will be playing their 880th game in franchise history this weekend against Detroit. And Detroit is also looking for their 588th franchise win during the regular season. Notice how Detroit, Michigan equals 88. It also equals 83, and the Detroit Lions enter this weekend with a record of 8-3. 83, the Gematria of expelled, as we saw earlier. George Santos was expelled a span of 133 days after his birthday. Expelled also 133 reverse. Santos represented the 3rd district in New York. Both Sandra Day and New York equal 33. His expulsion occurred during his 333rd day in office. The word expulsion has triple Gematria of 333. A couple of these ciphers are pretty unconventional, but seems to be relevant nonetheless. And notice how Santos was also 33 weeks and 3 days before his next birthday yesterday. This is also 235 days before his birthday, and expelled from Congress equals 235 in ordinal. What also stood out is that yesterday was a span of 7 months and 22 days before his birthday. 7/22. And George was born on 7/22, July 22nd. This also points to Sandra Day O'Connor, who was born in El Paso, Texas, and then died in Phoenix, Arizona. Well, El Paso, Texas equals 7/22, while Phoenix, Arizona equals 2/27. There's also some more numbers here that link Sandra Day O'Connor to Henry Kissinger, who died just 2 days before she did. Both of them share ordinal gematria of 181. Sandra Day O'Connor was 18,811 days old when she became a federal justice. Henry Kissinger died a span of 181 days before his birthday. He also died 18,010 days after Richard Nixon resigned. And Kissinger was the Secretary of State under Richard Nixon at the time. So once again, one major news story in the media bleeding into another through the numbers, through the same symbolism that we've become familiar and accustomed with for all these years. And the last bit of synchronicity I'll leave you with for this video is that, you know, we have these syncs with O'Connor, right? I even mentioned Sinead O'Connor earlier in this video. My grandmother on my father's side had the maiden name O'Donnell, as she was Irish. I'm a quarter Irish, and this morning I got news that my grandmother passed away after a couple years battling cancer. So that's my element of synchronicity with this story, as there's always something more to the Matrix than, you know, any of us can really ever truly discover. So with that, peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.